Un acteur de la vie politique pour éclairer le public avec Wilgrid Ahouassou.
Bonsoir à toutes, bonsoir à tous. Très heureux d'être avec vous ce soir. Nous sommes bel et bien sur l'émission Le Forum Politique et nous sommes le mercredi 15 septembre 2021. C'est une émission spéciale. Elle se définit comme le gouvernement du peuple par le peuple. La démocratie est... Je reçois dans cette émission le Forum Politique Dr Peter Baofu, auteur de plus de 170 ouvrages. D'abord, il serait important, chers amis auditeurs, d'avoir une idée de la biographie de notre invité avec Yenan Boya. Qui est Peter Baofu, en un mot?
Merci Wilgrid Ahouassou. Peter Baofu est auteur de 137 nouvelles théories publiées dans des revues spécialisées, ainsi que d'articles multiples qui apportent une vision différente visant à remettre en cause des idées arrêtées dans des domaines aussi multiples que les sciences politiques et sociales, l'humanité, la culture, l'esprit et j'en passe. Ces livres sont référencés dans des librairies de prestigieuses universités à travers le monde, y compris à la Bibliothèque du Congrès des États-Unis d'Amérique à Washington, D.C. Peter Baofu, américain, est titulaire de 2 masters en sciences politiques de Northwestern University en Illinois à Chicago et un master en philosophie de Johns Hopkins University. Il a obtenu son PhD, donc son doctorat, en 1996 en sciences politiques au prestigieux Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Peter Baofu a été interviewé dans des médias de par le monde sur ses nombreuses théories sur le futur de l'humanité. Dr. Baofu, you're a thinker, you're a visionary.
Take South Eastern Asian countries, especially China, in Western societies, in Africa, the system of governance is considered anti-democratic. However, we can see that the Chinese political system has allowed China to succeed, to develop. How did they do it?
I think that it's very important at the beginning to understand that the kind of questioning that we have been talking about is very Western-centric. I'm not attacking you personally, I'm just talking about the questioning. Because this is kind of question that people in Western mass media, they talk like that to glorify Western way of governance. But as I said in my publications, that is extremely damaging to international political system because that kind of thinking is to demonize non-Western contribution to political system. A good example over here is about China that you just mentioned. I have written another book and I talk about the rise of authoritarian liberal democracy. That American, let's say Western liberal democracy is not quite democratic as you may think. In fact, they are quite dictatorial and authoritarian. On the other hand, authoritarian and so-called dictatorial system in some other countries is much more democratic. In other words, I overthrow the standard wisdom, the standard political correctness of talking about democracy versus authoritarianism. And I said, for example, that let's say in the US, the American liberal democracy in many ways is very authoritarian, is very dictatorial, contrary to what you believe in. On the other hand, authoritarian political system in some way, they are quite democratic. So the question is not either or. Liberal democracy versus authoritarian system. I said that they are together in each of the political systems, except that they maneuver with each other in different ways. The Chinese political system is no different than the American political system in that sense of the combination, but they behave in a different emphasis, different degree of focus on different political factors.
It's a way of authoritarianism in those countries, in Western countries, is a way of imposing authority so that those countries can develop.
I don't put it that way because it does not quite understand the sophistication of my thinking. I'm not talking about this. I'm trying to overthrow the conventional wisdom saying that liberal democracy in the West is democratic and the political system in the East or in Africa is authoritarian, and therefore this one, the Western one, is good. The Eastern, the African one, the non-Western one is bad because they're authoritarian and dictatorial. I am saying that the Western way of thinking, the political system, is also authoritarian in some other ways. And the so-called authoritarian system in the East is democratic in some other way. So neither of them is democratic nor authoritarian, but all of them are authoritarian and democratic at the same time, but in different ways, in different degrees, in different struggles.
Political system which was inherited somehow, can we adapt that political system to our culture, to our own realities?
Every time when you adopt something from one political system in one culture to another culture and another society, remember, you can learn from them in some ways, but in the end, you cannot be like them. Let me give you an analogy. If you're a man, you want to learn something from a woman, fine, but remember, she's a woman. You can learn something from her, but at the end of the day, you are a man. You cannot behave like her. But the same logic, if you are a woman, you want to learn something from a man, fine. But remember, he's a man, and he's not a woman. At the end of the day, you have to learn how to behave a woman yourself, but you can learn something from the man. But the same logic, a Western political system can learn something from the East or from something from Africa, for sure. But at the end of the day, you are not African, you are not Chinese. You are Western, and therefore you have to have the political system that you have. Conversely, in China or in Africa, they have their own political system, but they can learn something from the West. No problem about that. Copy that. But at the end of the day, you still have to come with something which is important in your own context. And you cannot borrow from them too much. Look at Afghanistan, is a good example. The US tried to make Afghanistan into a liberal democracy. After 20 years of occupying Afghanistan and spending so much money, the US got out. The Taliban get back in power. You see that? You can go in and bomb the hell out of other people and destroy them, make them to believe in whatever you want to believe, talk like what you want them to talk like, but at the end of the day, they don't behave like you. Once you leave, they go back to where they were before. Have you changed the Taliban, by the way, after 20 years of doing all of this? That's a good example. You can learn, but you cannot impose like that.
Alors, Dr. Peter Baofu, homosexuality in Africa was not tolerated. It has been imported. It has been imported from Western cultures. Western cultures are asking African countries to tolerate homosexuality by imposing that by imposing into African countries tolerating homosexuality. Are African countries rejecting their own values?
As a start, I do not take side with either one, those who are straight and those who are homosexual. But what I want to say is that in the case of Africa, it has something to do with Western colonialism and Western post-colonialism in Africa. So the West has get used to lecture and preach their values on the rest of the world, in this case in Africa. And because Africa is poor, so Africa has been receiving aid from Western countries, so they attach this kind of requirements for many of those aids. So if you do not do what they want you to do, the chance is something is going to happen to you financially, for example, politically, or even military. So it is part of the legacy to understand that we have to understand the world order created by the West during the age of European colonialism, and now we are in the age of post-colonial era. So that is also another problem too. So yes, in a way, that's because of imposition by outside powers. But as I said before, you can impose as much as you want. My prediction, however, is that in the end, Africans will still behave like Africans. There will be some change because of some pressure. But I don't think that in the end, Africa is going to behave like Sweden or Norway or Italy or France. I think it's just wishful thinking. But then you can still learn from them. By the way, they can also learn from you too. It goes either way. But again, you will be what you are in the end. And they will be what they are. The West will not become Africans, by the way, and neither will Africa become Western. You can impose on them as much as you like. But at the end of the day, it's the superficiality. But the deep substance is still the same in each of them.
How do we promote a world where differences are accepted? How can our little Africans, our little brothers, have their own way of thinking?
Here is go back to the previous question, which I tried to answer, but maybe my publication is a bit too sophisticated for people to understand. So let me just repeat it one more time. It's exactly what I mean by authoritarian liberal democracy. How do you respect differences? What I'm trying to say is that the center of our political system, in this case democracy, in the name of democracy, democracy becomes authoritarian because more and more democracy does not accept differences, is afraid of differences. They talk about differences, but they're afraid of them. In the US, for example, in the United States, nowadays you have some people, they talk about equality. Equality over here means that if a white criticizes a black, that's racism. But if a black criticizes a white, that's social justice. It's not okay for a white to say, I'm proud to be a white. That's racist. But it's okay for a black to say, we are proud to be a black. That's okay. It's enlightenment, it's empowerment. Now, do you accept differences when you talk like that? You don't. That means that you only accept who you are, the values that you advocate. But when someone do the same thing, you do not allow that. The same thing about a woman. Nowadays in America, a woman, when they criticize a man, it's okay. But when a man criticizes a woman, that's sexist. Now, you talk about how do you respect differences. There's no respect here. Respect is one way only. You respect the other side. Nowadays, if you criticize a gay, a homosexual in the US, you are in trouble. You are homophobic. But on the other hand, a gay can criticize the straight. Their way of living, their way of doing things, their way of having sex is okay. It is sexual liberation. You see that respect is one way. Now, the Western way is always trying to impose that thinking on Africa, the previous question. They impose the values on you. Is it okay for you Africans to impose African way of life on the West? Is it okay next time you go to Sweden, you go to France, go to Germany, and you lecture the German Chancellor, you lecture the Swedish, the Nordish, or whoever, and all those people about your African way of life, and they should adopt the way of life. No. You listen to them, they don't listen to you. Their value is for you to adopt. But your values are not for them to adopt. Now, is this respect or differences? That's called democracy. I'm saying, that's exactly what I said. Democracy over time become more and more authoritarian. You see the problem over here. That's why democracy, as we understand that, will not last.
Je voudrais remercier le docteur Peter Baofu d'être venu au Bénin, d'avoir accepté notre invitation.
Il est américain, il faut le dire. Hein.
Il est américain, il faut le dire, d'avoir accepté notre invitation pour cette émission. Merci, docteur Baofu.
Merci bien.
Thank you very much. Hein.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ok, merci beaucoup, docteur Peter Baofu.